This is the CHGO Cubs podcast. We are coming to you live on July 30th. My name is Corey. I am joined, as always, by Brendan. And Brendan, the Cubs drop the finale, the fourth game in St. Louis, but they do win 3 of 4. They win 8 games in a row heading into Sunday. As you and I record this, they are 3.5 games out of both the division and a playoff spot in the wild card race. Brendan, they did it. They messed around and they did it.
Can you believe this? We talked about all year about extremes, right? For like the season to turn around or even to be competitive, you need some type of extreme stretch or extreme performance. And for the Cubs, it's been right up until the trade deadline, and the extreme performances have been Cody Bellinger and Christopher Morel. So this is what happens sometimes in baseball. You get these weird extremes, and we're seeing it, Corey.
Yeah, and credit to them, right? Of course. I mean, the players on the field, but
and to us.
But we looked at this schedule coming out of the All-Star break and said pretty much bluntly that if they couldn't take care of business under the Cubs were under 500 at the time, but against a bunch of other teams that were under 500, underperforming, not good, they weren't going to deserve help from the front office at the deadline. Like, they had to get it done, and they did so. Even losing on Sunday, Brendan, this was better than I think most of us even would have expected in our wildest dreams. They will come back to Wrigley Field to welcome the Reds. It's a tough week coming up, the Reds and the Braves next weekend, but they will enter the week at home a day before the trade deadline, over 500, under 4 games out of multiple playoff spots, right? I don't think there's any discussion. I think the question right now is to what degree are they buying, right? Yeah. I don't think selling – a lot of people are going to have differing opinions on how this deadline should go and what they should do and who they should keep, who they should trade, this, that, and the other, right? But I think for a market like the Cubs, for a team from every level of the organization that spoke – coming into this season about wanting to compete for a playoff spot, believing that this group could compete for a playoff spot, when you're this close in those playoff races, your team has just riled off 8 in a row, before dropping the last one here in St. Louis. This organization cannot have any other direction come Tuesday but buying, even if it's not, over the top crazy moves. But the conversation of selling to the degree that we were having it and everybody else was having it for so long, it's over, Brendan.
Oh, yeah, it's definitely over. I think you do see some slivers of chatter of does it even make sense to buy, even though they're only 3.5 games back? Because what are the chances they actually go on a run in the playoffs for a World Series, right? That's always the question. Should they actually go out and soft buy and not get back prospects for Bellinger and Stroman? So, I mean, on the surface, I think intuitively you and I are absolutely, yes, it makes sense to go soft buy. But then you take a step back and you try to understand, okay, well, does it objectively without taking all the emotions into account? And I do think where I stand on this is that it still makes sense to soft buy for several reasons. I think for me, the biggest reason it makes sense to soft buy, because I'm a believer in adjusting under extreme emotional context. I think you look at the 2015 Cubs, or you look at even past playoff teams. I think adjustments lock in when the emotional context and leverage of games are highest. And I think for the Cubs to make informed decisions about their future in the next year or two, for me, I want to learn more about Justin Steele in high leverage moments as a starter. I want to learn about his stamina going into October. I want to learn about Hayden Wesneski in those contexts. I think just that point alone versus getting back a top 50 prospect by Bellinger, right, I think it's more valuable learning about those pitchers and exposing them and having them adjust for the immediate season next year. And then you start thinking, what is the probability that trading Bellinger markedly improves their chance to win next year? Maybe the return package is good, But given what we've seen so far in the market, I think the threshold is around 3 prospects, borderline top 50 prospect. I don't think it's an obvious yes, this move will make him better next year. I think it's a fringe type decision. So overall, when you look at what the return is, how it's going to affect next season, and also how not trading them affects their current group, I think it makes sense to leverage the current context and allow these guys to adjust and be exposed to it. And then last point before we get into specifics here, the reality is there's a lot of money to be made. When the Cubs are good and competing, I know you have a lot of crazy fans like you and I who will always watch, but the reality is a lot of fans don't tune in when the Cubs are not good. Marquee's launching their new direct app. The numbers will go up. It's a pretty direct correlation. When the Cubs are good, given in the years past, you get about 100% increase in viewers. It's just how it is. There's a huge amount of money to be made, and whether you like it or not, and like Tom Ricketts in ownership or not, that money does matter for their competitiveness.
Yeah.
So it's multifaceted.
Yeah, I mean, look, there was a rumor on Sunday that Bellinger, they're telling teams don't ask about Cody Bellinger anymore. Whether that's true or not, I don't know, but that's what was going around Sunday morning. And, I think if you're asking you and I, we're, aggressively buying. Like, let's go, right? I think
what do you mean by aggressively buying?
No.
You want to go like
aggressively in the buy camp, right? Like,
oh yeah.
But you a minute ago kind of just addressing, because there is, right? There are some people who are still like, I'm not sold, right? Like, so what? They beat the Cardinals and the Nationals or whatever. But listen, I'm as big a homer as there is. But I'll put it to you this way, right? Like Theo Epstein said, every opportunity to win is sacred. They're in the race. The discussion we were having for so many months was, we felt like they cost themselves being in the race earlier by playing bad players too long, not making better decisions in the offseason, et cetera, et cetera. We're yelling about David Ross's lineup every other night. But at the end of the day, reason that those conversations were happening is because they were 8-9 games out. Like, they were trending in the wrong direction, right? Like, they played themselves to the spot they need to be. When you are a market as big as the Chicago Cubs, when you have sold off the last few deadlines, you cannot punt a season when you're within 3 or 4 games of not only the playoff spot, but a division lead. Like, you are almost, right now, if you played, it's next weekend you have the Atlanta Braves. It'll be a very tough series, right? But if you were playing 4 games with the Milwaukee Brewers coming up to start this week, you sweep that series, you're winning the division. Like, that's where they are right now. They are within striking distance. And was looking at, just some of the numbers from friend of the podcast, Matt Clapp at the Blog Finds on Twitter, was tweeting on July 17th, the Cubs playoff odds, just to make the playoffs, were 6%. As we sit here recording this now, Brendan, they are 29%. They were over 30 before they dropped the finale in St. Louis.
Nuts.
That's a significant bump. And to your point about wanting to see some of these players in a more competitive environment, you just watched it, right? This team was basically told flat out by their president in the media, if they don't show up in the next week or 2 weeks, right, that's going to make the decision for us. And what did they do? They showed up. And you saw it in every single game. This team had, throughout that 8-game winning streak and just this last stretch of baseball here in the second half, multiple games where they have come back from deficits. Against the Cardinals, they had a game, they're down 3 times, and they come back each time and win the game. They're making those plays like Mike Tauchman did to win the game on Friday night, right? And you see the reaction from guys, you tweeted it, the guys like Dansby and Nico. These guys want to win. They deserve to have some help, some reinforcements. And I'm still in the camp where, like, I'm not sitting here saying they should trade PCA for 2 months of a rental, right? I don't think you sell out for 2023. I would still be looking at guys, hey, can we get guys that have control for next year that help us out in 2024 as well? Or can we trade from this prospect depth that we have that Jed has been building for years, and even if it is a rental, get some help, but not move out guys that are like horribly consequential to, this next window and wave of prospects. But to me, like, there's just not the discussion is over, right? Like
I think
they
so.
played themselves back into it. And when you are a market that is this big, when you spend this much money, even on the team this year, like you cannot look at this and say, we don't think the group is, going to win the World Series, so we're not going to go for it. You can't do it when you're the Chicago Cubs. And I would add to that, every team is different, right? I'm not even big on the comparisons, but when you look at where they are in the race, the
Braves.
things they can do, well, it's multiple. Like we saw the Braves win the World Series in 2021 in a
Nationals,
very
2019.
similar spot. The Washington Nationals, very similar spot. The Philadelphia Phillies
last year.
they didn't win the World Series, but they got there, right? They were very close. And it's all a very similar spot. Teams people felt like were underperforming, under 500. They needed a run. They needed some help. And again, I'm not saying that these teams are the same. Don't, go and look, well, they had better this or they had better this. Like, they're all different teams. But the point is, like, you have an opportunity where this team is playing themselves into the race and deciding that you don't feel like participating, like you said, Brendan, for another set of, it's this team's 8th best prospect. Like, miss me with it. I don't want it anymore. You know what I mean? Like, the system is not in the place it was in 2014, 2015, where you have so many like blue chip feeling prospects, but it's deep. You have a lot of guys who have a lot of talent all through the levels. There was a day the other day I saw Iowa Cubs broadcaster Alex Cohn showing like the entire organization is winning and performing well and just like clean sweeping days at a time where every level is winning, guys are performing. You can trade from some of that. You can make this team better without mortgaging 2024, 2025. Like, you don't have to do anything that's insane, but and what I want to talk about with you on this episode in particularly is what are the most important areas where they can improve? Where do we think they might improve? And I think that they can do a lot of that stuff without giving up stuff that's going to make even the most, prospect hugging type people upset. I think they can find a way to thread that needle where everybody kind of feels pretty good about this, but you can't watch Dansby and Nico. I mean, that, Brendan, like that 9th inning on Friday, in a nutshell,
Spectacular.
Like, if one inning of baseball could cement and say, listen, you are not selling from this team, it was the 9th inning on Friday night. That double play, absurd by Nico
Disgusting.
to even attempt that. He's
Disgusting.
facing the other direction.
Unbelievable.
And then for Tauchman to go up and do that and keep that in the ballpark and win that game, you see everybody's reaction. You don't have to immediately jump from like, yes, they took 3 or 4 from the Cardinals, they're winning the World Series, but they are objectively in this playoff race. They have looked more like the team that we believed they could be, which is still not crazily over 500, right?
Yeah.
But they are a solid baseball team. Get them some help in their areas of deficiency. Let's play some fun games in August and September. Let's screw around, right? Let's do it. Let's screw around a little bit, Jed. Come on.
I know. And to your point, before we get into the specifics, the intention for next year, right? Like, I don't think it's a black or white decision. I don't think trading Bellinger means by default next year you're sacrificing your competitiveness even a little bit. I think it's a different argument. I do believe this. I don't think, like, you're never going to be able to quantify this, right? But like, biologically speaking, when the stress is higher, your ability to learn, to lock in adjustments is more primed in both the good and the bad. Like, you can develop the yips under really extreme circumstances. We've seen that with players in the past. At the same time, you can actually lock in positive adjustments. So when I look at Hayden Wesneski and a lot of these pitchers, and even Christopher Morel, I am very drawn to the most extreme, highest leverage games possible. And I want those guys to continue their development. That way they don't have to perhaps do that next year. And is it a certainty that's good for them or good for the Cubs? No, it's not. It's a marginal perhaps improvement, but it could be extreme. I do think there were some instances in 2015 that group took over to 2016, and I'm curious about it. I don't think by not selling Bellinger, you're saying, all right, well, 2024, we're gonna risk it a little bit. We're gonna sacrifice a little bit of 2024 for this season. No, it's really not like that for me. In fact, you could be improving the quality of your roster in the form of faster development by giving these guys opportunities to compete, Corey.
Yeah, absolutely. I've already started dreaming about the Cubs are, competing for the division. It's September. They call up PCA to start playing defense and stealing bases. I
already thought about that. Late September, got PCA center field. Oof, man. With that middle infield.
Listen, I'm ready to get carried away.
Let's go.
But, and like you look at some of the numbers too, like the Cubs have been the best offense in the league in the second half since the All-Star break. Like they're atop the run scored leaderboard. You're looking at WRC plus as a complete group. It's the Chicago Cubs, right? And I know some people are going to look, and we talked about this, like it was a schedule that they had to take advantage of. I don't care if they did it against bad teams. That's what they had to do. That's the schedule that was in front of them, and it was do or die, and they did it, right? Yeah. And you look at their schedule coming up, it's going to be this is going to be a tough. This is going to be the. Is this the most intense week of Chicago Cubs baseball that we've had in?
I mean, probably 2019. The end of
I mean, I don't know.
Trade deadline. We got these two tough series. Summer.
Yeah. I mean, just the timing of this. They're over 500 now. They're coming back home. You've got the Reds, who are currently ahead of you in the division and the wild card and all these standings. You got 4 with them, and then 3 against the Braves, who are just so good. All with the trade deadline kind of sandwiched in the middle there. This is going to be intense. But then you kind of look at the end of August schedule and particularly September, right? Like just quickly going through the teams they play in September, Brendan. And some of these teams are in the race, but like the Reds, the Giants, the D-backs, the Rockies, the D-backs, the Pirates, the Rockies, the Braves again, and then the Brewers to finish out September and the season there on October 1st. Like, sure, the Braves, but like other than that, it's the teams you're going to have to beat to win this division or make the playoffs, and like a bunch of okay teams from the NL West. Like there's not a lot of juggernauts in that schedule, and it was the same. You kind of go to the end of August as well. Like I'm not saying nothing is a cakewalk, right? But the second half of August, the White Sox, the Royals, the Tigers, the Pirates, and then the Brewers again. Like it's a lot of not very good teams. Like this team just went on a run. Their offense is finally scoring runs at a clip that you can live with, right? Like, and are excited about. They're atop the league in the second half. Like, you gotta let them ride it out and see what they can do here. There's a lot of different directions for that. You have some teams like the Texas Rangers who have already decided to kind of like empty their ammunition and say, okay, like DeGrom is out, but we're going to go for it, and we're going to make a bunch of trades and really go for this here. Mets are making moves. Like things are happening, right? But this team did it, it was asked and answered, right? This is what you guys need to do to prevent Jed from selling off, and they did it. They almost literally could not have done a better job of showing up when they really needed to.
All right, let's take a quick ad break here. We'll come back, talk about the specifics. Who do you want to add? Which areas? A lot to discuss there, but first ad break from our sponsor, Hooters. Hooters is your spot to catch all the games this season. All the games upcoming next week, Corey. All the high-leverage Cubs games, watch them at Hooters. Step up to our play for world-famous wings, delicious seafood, stacked sandwiches, salads, and more. Tons of great beer specials and $6 drinks all day, every day. That's dangerous, Corey. Check out the seafood specials as well. $19.83 for a pound of crab legs, and great prices on buffalo and steamed shrimp. Hooters is celebrating 40 years in business all year long. In honor of the anniversary on the 4th of every month, Hooters will be hosting throwback events, bringing back the 80s with 83-cent wings and other great specials. Next one is on August 4th. Other break here from our sponsor, Game Time. This is the week to use Game Time, Corey. Game Time is the fast and easy way to buy tickets for all the sports, music, comedy, and theater near you with killer deals on last-minute tickets and their best price guarantee. You can stop stressing over the tickets and start getting hyped for the fun that you'll have. They have the Game Time guarantee, which means you'll always get the best price. If you find tickets in the same section and row for less elsewhere, Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. If you want to go see the Cubs play the Reds, play the Braves, you weren't expecting an 8-game winning streak, and now you want to go see the Cubs, go for a playoff run here, you can use Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and guess what? Use code CHGO for $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply. Again, create an account and redeem code CHGO for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. One last break here before we get back into this. New customers, download the DraftKings Sportsbook app and use code CHGO. This is the time to bet on baseball. Trade deadlines coming up. Going to be a lot of different prop bets with new players. Bet just $5 to score $150 in bonus bets instantly. Again, use code CHGO only at DraftKings Sportsbook. Gambling problem, call 1-800-GAMBLER. In Massachusetts, call 1-800-327-5050 or visit Gambling Help. LionMA.org in New York, call 877-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY 467-369. In Kansas, call 1-800-522-4700. On behalf of Boot Hill Casino and Resorts in West Virginia, gambling problem, call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit www.1-800-GAMBLER.net. All games regulated by the West Virginia Lottery. Play responsibly in partnership with Hollywood Casino at Charlestown Races. In Connecticut, help is available for problem gambling. Call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org. 21 or over in most eligible states, but age do vary by jurisdiction. See DraftKings.com/sportsbook for details and state-specific responsible gambling resources. Bonus bets expire 7 days after issuance. 1 boost per eligible game. Opt-in required. Max bet is $50. 10+ legal requirement for 100% boost. Eligibility, wagering, and deposit restrictions do apply.
All right, Brendan, let's talk about, okay.
Yeah.
We've set the table, right?
We did.
There's no selling. We're not entertaining any discussion of selling here. We weren't able to go live today, but if there was a YouTube chat, better not see any discussion of selling.
No.
But let's talk about how should they approach this, right? I will say I was kind of I know they wanted to wait, kind of until the last minute. I do understand some in the camp, though. Like, I wish they would be a little more aggressive on some of this stuff. Where obviously the trade deadline is close, but we know what the areas of deficiency are. We've known about them pretty much since spring training, right? We kind of could accurately predict that first base in that situation would be potentially an issue, maybe third base, and as usual, they have cobbled together a nice bullpen, but could still use some reinforcements there. But I would have been okay if they had maybe addressed this sooner, right? Like other teams kind of started this process last week. Like you could have, hey, like this team is on a run. Like let's get some, give them a boost here and show them that, we're going to back them up here, but whatever. If you were looking at this roster and you were to say what the most pressing area of need is, right? Because I think part of the discussion is going to be that we don't expect them to sell out for 2023, right? If they can trade from their depth and improve multiple areas, great. But improving every area, right, might prove maybe not super easy if you're not willing to part with super long-term pieces or guys you really believe in, etc. If you can get guys that are under control for more years, hey, great. Like Jed can get creative. Let's see what happens. But if we were operating under the thought that they're going to improve one area, right? And hopefully it's not that. But if I asked you, they can only improve one area, what are you doing come this trade deadline? What type of player are you acquiring? Yeah,
it's a toss-up. First off, as a preface, I think you need to improve both the corner infield and the bullpen. That's an obvious one, right?
Sure.
But
Yeah.
getting a third baseman, getting a first baseman, and getting bullpen help might push them over the luxury tax, right? They're about $5 million away from Cott's expectation right now. It may not be possible. Jed may not want to go out and sacrifice 1 year and amplify your potential penalty by trading above the tax. So, given all that, I think the number one issue for me to limit some of the dumbness and randomness is let's stabilize the back end of the bullpen. I think the bullpen's been good recently. ALLCITY has been super impressive. Daniel Palencia has been great. 100-mile-per-hour fastballs, good sliders. Leiter has fallen off a little bit, but still showcasing the same stuff. Overall, the bullpen has been good, right? I don't think it's been a huge weak point. But I look at the bullpen help. I look at what they currently can do with their potential payroll. That seems to be like the one area where I want them to improve the most. I think you can get by. I don't like it, and I never liked it. I think you can get by in third base right now. Madrigal has been better than I expected. Defense, definitely better than I expected. His offense right now is actually similar to like Nico Horner's offensive output. I'm fine with that. I'm surprised he's even doing that. So I think that's fine. And then at first base, the hope is you get some production from Tauchman going forward in center field, and you get to mix match with Bellinger at first base. I think you can get by with that. I think you can squint and make the argument that it's not necessary to go out and sacrifice, let's say, bullpen help for offense at the corner positions. That being said, we'll get into this. I prefer Jed to get really creative here and somehow make all three of those areas work. And that means trading from some of the heavier contract guys like Smiley, and it's not going to be possible, but you look at someone like Barnhart or Mancini or Drew Smiley, perhaps shed some payroll, improve elsewhere, give out more prospects just to get rid of that salary. I think that would be my primary focus for this trade deadline.
Yeah, I think I agree. It's going to be interesting to see how they approach this, right? Like, I think we've all noted a million times that you'd like more power, more thump in this lineup. But at the same time, like, they clearly like Nick Madrigal, and he's done, I've eaten crow on this a million times. I'm happy to keep doing it. He looks great at third base. I mean, he's making diving plays. He figured out a way to kind of shorten some of those throws when he needs to. The numbers like him there. Like, for them to find someone who can even equal that defense is not likely to be easy, right?
Yeah.
Wisdom wasn't doing it, right? Morel, they don't believe in, can do it. So that certainly factors in. And yeah, they obviously, and with good reason, like this kind of switch up that they do against righties, so that Tauchman can get in center and Belly can play first base. And, Bellinger's great at first base, and Mike Tauchman is literally saving you games in center field. So, interesting to see how they decide to approach that. I think bullpen help would be number one for me. And, really just anything that gets Trey Mancini off the field. Like, I'm not trying to continually dog on the guy, but he's just been awful. And I think that's where it gets kind of tricky, right? Like, if you did move guys to acquire a third baseman, are you just not playing Madrigal anymore? Like, he still only has a 700 OPS, but he's been better since he came back from Iowa that last stint, and they, were clearly hoping that would happen. So I don't know if I immediately expect them to move on from that or like reduce his role to really super temporary if they feel like he's gotten hot at the plate, right? And he's playing a good defensive third base. And then what do you do if you acquire someone at first and then you want, you can use the DH and like Tauchman can get in there, but I'm just saying they clearly like some of the things that they're doing. It's not a reason to not get better, but interesting to see what they do if they do acquire someone that plays a corner infield spot. Again, you just got to stop playing Mancini. They have to stop. If you're serious about competing, you must stop doing that. It didn't work. It's fine. It's a bad signing. They happen. But he's been bad on defense. He's been bad on offense. It's hurting them. It's really hurting them that they keep running him out there.
It's hurting everyone.
Yeah, and again, not to like pick on him, right? I'm sure he's a nice person. I'm rooting for him. But as we talked about with certain things, there's only so many areas where you're really actually able to improve on this team, right? Yeah. We have to hope. I'm sure I can hear the YouTube chat as if we were doing this live. Seiya's struggling. Again, I see it. I'm aware of it. But they're going to keep playing him, right? Like Happ has shown a little bit more power. He's been slugging more. He's had his ups and downs. He's playing, right? Like Dansby's playing. Nico's playing. Their catchers are playing. Like there's only so many ways, unless they're moving those guys, to improve this team. And the most obvious one right now is finding somebody that can DH, maybe play first base, or a little bit of both, or just mix in with the guys that they have, like Bellinger, to stop Trey Mancini from seeing the field. Yeah. That's the easiest way to improve this offense, is getting somebody that can slug a little bit, and you just swap him out for Trey Mancini.
Yeah, we've referenced this in the past, but during Yu Darvish's injury, Theo made the comment, you can't confidently expect Darvish when he was injured, right? It's not, a complete parallel, but we do have a history of chronic injuries with Nick Madrigal, right? Hamstring problems. Yeah. It's not a certainty that you can rely on Madrigal for the rest of the season. So then the idea is, okay, well, yes, you do want to give Madrigal playing time, but what if he does get injured again? Can they survive? Which you can make the argument they can, with Patrick Wisdom playing third base more regularly. I think like that could be fine. Or you go out and you trade for someone like Jarmer Candelario, former Cub, was in that Justin Wilson trade many years ago. Candelario's having a great year. He's batting .258. He has 16 homers in 419 plate appearances, a .353 weighted on base average, a 121 WRC plus. Defensively, he's been great. Total WAR is 3 on the nose this year. He could be a guy. And then that right there is about $2.5 million to your luxury tax payroll. So again, using Cott's expectations, and it's never like these are always kind of rough ideas. It's never like totally going to be right on the dot. But if you use that, you're still inching closer, right? And then the question is, well, do you want to go out and just get Candelario and not get bullpen help? Because that might be what you have to do. And so that's, for me, it's a weird balance.
Can you explain, if folks aren't familiar, because I think you're using the luxury tax as kind of a I think Jed wouldn't do this marker. Yeah. Can you just explain that? What exactly are you talking about, and why do you think that Jed would be avoiding it? Just in case anyone listening doesn't know.
Generally speaking, you can get into the fine details of like the penalties, but generally speaking, what happens when you go over the luxury tax, you get taxed for every dollar above the amount. And you have, over time, you lose draft pick order, you lose draft pick value as a result. So from Jed's perspective, you're looking at sacrificing current competitiveness for the future in the form of having to pay more on the dollar for your players. And you look at someone like, you look at the Cody Bellinger situation, right? And you look at Marcus Stroman. If you go over the luxury tax, the qualifying offer doesn't look as valuable as a result. And then if you go over it again for a second consecutive year, the penalties increase. If you go over for a third consecutive year, the penalties increase. So if you're in the camp of, I don't want to buy this year because I'm worried about 2024, well, this is something that you want to consider, because you can still protect 2024, improve, but you can do so by staying underneath the luxury tax. I don't think Jed's going to go over it, just because he's always talked about, one eye on the future, one eye on the present, and the moves he's made up until this point have all been under that context. Unless something drastically changes, my expectation is he's not going to go out and get a flurry of players, because you'll go over that luxury tax.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So there you go. Well, and it's also one of those things where I suppose the hope would be in years to come, maybe starting next year, they plan to blow by it for a
which they've
years.
Done in years past.
Yeah.
Like during their competitive era, they blew over it two consecutive years. So they have done this, and the fact they're even inching closer to it, I think, is a positive sign, and also was a point of criticism up until now over the past few weeks of why did you, and we talked about this during the offseason, and I think this is a good example of why I didn't even like at the time going after Fulmer, because it does limit your trade potential. We talked about this in like February. It's like, I don't want to get to a point where you need clear bullpen help, but you don't have the flexibility to do it. And so like Fulmer at the time, when you look at the expectations of the contract situation, like $3 million for Fulmer made sense, but like things started to snowball a little bit and the flexibility isn't quite as strong as I had hoped it would be. Going into the year, I thought we were going to be 10 to 15 million under the tax. We're about 5 right now. So then yeah, we had this discussion in like February. I'm like, does Fulmer make sense? I'm like, well, 3 million is not that bad. Right now they're at 10 to 15 million, but then like it wasn't 10 to 15 million. So, those were always the sacrifices you were willing to make.
Yeah, but kind of getting back to, I think for me, I've said a lot that I think Madrigal, especially if he's able to play multiple positions like this, if he's able to hit the way that he has since he came back from that stint in Iowa, like that has a place on a competitive team. A guy with good bat to ball skills, he can move around the bases when he needs to. There's a place for it. Would I prefer they start someone with more slug at third base? Yeah, sure. Like, of course, right? The lineup needs it. Yeah. But when I look at this team, I think adding another reliever would the sort of shockwave that would have, I think, would be quite important. ALLCITY has obviously really thrived and dialed it up in the closer spot. Leiter is, a good, now he's your number 2, right? We've seen good stuff from Merriweather, Fulmer. Like they've all kind of, they've, as they usually do, they've figured out a way to cobble the bullpen together. But if you're able to move some of those guys down one inning or one, sort of leverage spot, I think that's a big effect. And then also we've seen in some of these games where, Adbert has pitched 2 days in a row or, threw a lot of pitches the day before, et cetera. You kind of feel that like, I don't know if I like it, right? If he's down today, like who's coming in the 7th if there's a fire, then who's closing.
Well, it's how it was for Palencia. It's like, oh man, like I like Palencia. I like Ross trusting him, but at the same time, I don't want it to happen in October.
Right. And again, like it allows you to not lean on each specific guy quite as much, right? Yeah. It allows for, you've seen it with multiple guys in this bullpen. They needed time to be moved to a different role and adjust, right? Work on some things, kind of fine tune their stuff before they're back and being trusted in bigger spots. And if you can just add a quality arm to this group, I think it just lessens that kind of burden on everybody else and would make things a lot more comfortable. It's also sort of a, not backwards, but kind of like backhanded way of helping your starting staff, right? The more you can trust your bullpen, the more innings you feel confident that your bullpen can cover, the less you have to ride a starter if it's not going well, right? If you have a start that doesn't go well, or if you have guys where you're maybe anticipating a shorter start, it's okay. Like you can be prepared for that. You can have some of these guys who have experience going multiple innings come in and piggyback, and then you have a handful of trusted arms in the back end of that bullpen to come in and like really nail things down if you've got a close late game. So I think that would be the priority for me. Just looking at everything, right? Like Stroman, it's not his best stretch, but his numbers overall are pretty in line with like who he's been for the majority of his career. So I think like this rough stretch for him has really just kind of moved his numbers back from being like, oh shoot, he's atop the National League to, oh, he's kind of like classic Marcus Stroman, which is really good and is going to be really good.
Have you thought about maybe going out and getting a starting pitcher? Like
well, that's kind of where I'm going with this is like Justin Steele has obviously been unbelievable. He's been one of the best pitchers in the National League. He was great again the other night in St. Louis on a very hot, like muggy night. Like he was gutting through that. Those Mississippi fastballs make it through the humidity. Doesn't matter if it's in St. Louis or not. Yeah. But, Jamison Tyone has been a lot better. I think he's got a sub, 2 ERA, since like the start of July, which of course isn't that long, but hey, like we'll take it, right? Like given where that started, like sign me up. Yeah. The Wisniewski Smiley thing, it's, obviously sort of a work in progress. It's not great, but Kyle Hendricks was really good. The offense wasn't there for him on Sunday, but, a few runs, like otherwise another really good start for Kyle Hendricks on Sunday. So I feel like at a minimum, you feel like you can throw out any one of Stroh, Steele, and Hendricks on a daily basis and feel like they're going to keep you in the running for a W. And, you know, honestly, like with Tyone, I think you're feeling better, right? It's still a work in progress. I know you've kind of dialed in on some of the specifics there a bunch, but we're getting away from like, oh, he threw 2 innings and gave up 5 runs, right? And they had to go to the bullpen. Like he's putting together good starts and hopefully continues to trend in that direction. So it maybe wouldn't be my priority. And like going out and finding a starter that's going to be better than the options you might have, it's not always easy, and that can tend to get a little pricier. Yeah. Not opposed to it. Again, if we're talking about what this team needs, right, they could use another quality starter to go in that kind of like 3-4-ish area in the rotation. I think you'd feel really good about that. They need thump. The corner infield spots are kind of, you know, or someone that DHs are really the places where you're going to be able to find a spot for them in the lineup without disrupting guys who we don't expect to get disrupted. And bullpen help, because everybody always needs bullpen help. It doesn't matter who you are, you always need bullpen help. So those are the areas you can, I'm curious where, like, you know, if you're watching on YouTube later, like drop it in the comments, like how would you kind of prioritize things, or if you want them to get something else, I mean, let us know. But I think those are kind of the 3 priority areas. For me, it would be a reliever, because I think you can probably get that done without giving up too much, right? Somebody who can at least help you for this year, if not longer, if you can find it. And then thump somewhere in the lineup. Yeah. Like you need it bad. And I don't know exactly how they would piece it all together in terms of who's playing where, who's starting on a daily basis, but thump would be nice.
Yeah, you know, a lot of these wants is what we talked about, you know, last off season. It's like, oh man, sure. Like I don't want to be in a position. This was us talking, you know, during January. I don't want to be in a position where we're talking about, you know, 1 or 2 game difference of making the playoffs. Like I want something that's clear and something that you don't have to squint at to be confident in. And unfortunately, like, you know, they did miss on Mancini, and so far, like they're kind of missing on Smiley a little bit, especially for 2024, and that's 16 million, actually 17 million right there. So it's like, those are the decisions going forward that Jet can't afford to lose on. And going forward, Jet can't afford to lose on trades, even in this trade deadline. This is like, for Jet, I think, this could be a defining deadline for him, and you can always go back at the core deadline. But when I say defining, this has potential to dramatically change the outlook for this season and for next season. And if Jed hits big on improving the quality of this team this season, with implications for next year, then our tone can change a lot. And then we start talking about Jed made those deals that we were hoping that he would hit on eventually. Jed made those deals that look creative and those types of returns we've been wanting for years. So I'm curious, man. This is going to be a big test for Jed. He hasn't had the opportunity to do it so far.
I do not wish. Trust me, all right? I do not wish that, Jim Hendry were still in control of this
Jim
team.
Hendry, yeah.
But, right,
Aramis Ramirez
like,
deal. Yeah.
Give me, where is our Aramis Ramirez deal? Where is the Kenny Lofton, like, Randall Simon situation?
Yeah.
Where you give up, what was it, Bobby Hill in one of those deals, right?
I loved Bobby Hill back then, though.
I'm sure you did. That's so on brand for you. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I know,
but you know what I'm saying, point. Like where you make that's a move for guys that kind of under the radar, and you don't give up things you regret in the future, and they just drastically help your team. You know what I mean? Like this team isn't super similar to the 2003 team, but it's if you approach the deadline, the reason I just thought of it was that was a team that didn't go on to win more than 90 games, right? but they do win the division, and they needed help, and they went out and got it. Like, that was obviously a slam dunk of, trades, but that's the situation that we're in here. Like, this isn't a juggernaut of a team, but if you can go out and swing some solid moves to really bolster this roster and clean up some of those deficiencies, they can win games.
I know. I'm getting more excited thinking about it, because like I've been thinking today, you have like Nelson Velasquez in AAA. You have fringe guys that could be valuable.
Trade them all.
Trade them all. You have like literally like 7 guys right there that you can imagine other teams would want to give an opportunity to.
Yeah.
So, and we've always talked about this, and Jed has even said this. Like, when you acquire prospects, or you're looking at these prospects, sometimes they're acquired for the sole purpose of just accumulating value to make these trades. This is the first opportunity that we've had talking about this team where that seems like a legitimate possibility right now. So I want them to capitalize on that.
Before you get to this last ad break here, and we'll continue to have some more discussion toward the end of the show after we finish the ad break, but just for posterity, right? If we're talking about this system, guys who we've seen at the major league level, guys that are still 18 in the complex league, is there anyone that it doesn't matter the circumstance, it doesn't matter who's coming back, I'm not trading this person, or is everybody up for grabs?
Everyone's up for grabs. Kevin Alcantara, PCA. This doesn't mean like, I'm not high on them. I am high on them. But like, they all do have some deficiencies in their profile. Like, very rare do you get a prospect that's like an unequivocal top 3 prospect in the league. You can look at Kevin Alcantara and you can even say, okay, well, he's still young. He still needs to go through AA. He still needs to showcase the ability to make hard contact and not strike out that much frequently. You can look at PCA and say, you know what? Best defensive center fielder I've seen in the system ever following this team. I love the energy. I love the contact potential. But nevertheless, I'm a little skeptical that the power and the current whiff rate will be sufficient in Major League Baseball. He still needs to go through that adjustment phase. There's absolutely no one. I would trade anyone if it meant the Cubs would compete this year and going forward if the return is multi-year. Everyone's on the chopping block for me.
Yeah.
I mean,
I would have a hard time trading PCA. I just think he's an unbelievable talent. But
it's a tough decision. But the point there is, we'll do the ad break here, but like, this is not a comparison whatsoever. So please don't misinterpret this. But like, we've had prospects that are high defensive guys who we imagine had high defensive floors. You know where I'm going with this. And like, Alberto Mora was a guy, didn't have the offensive tools that PCA had, didn't have the athleticism that PCA had, but the defensive floor we thought would boost his overall value, and it wasn't the case. I like high offensive guys that don't strike out, that hit for a ton of power. PCA's not that guy right now.
Yeah, I mean, I think, look, the point is, like, for certain guys we're talking about, like, you're not trading them for only 2023 help. Like, if it's a rental, someone like Candelario is a rental, right? Like, and I'm not, obviously some of these big names are not what is required to get Candelario. I'm just speaking about someone who is strictly a rental that has come up a lot, right? Candelario is a rental. So, but if you're getting someone who's going to be with this team and can be a star for this team or something for
multiple years,
2024, 2025, everything's on the table. I'm just saying, like, PCA in a kind of separate category for me, where like we'd have to be talking like big time trade.
Yeah,
like,
that's what I mean.
But yeah, look, like, again, like, you build up this depth for a reason. You cannot play every prospect that you have accumulated, and we don't really need to look very far to go look at the core, right? Like, even guys that were thought to be in that core didn't make it to the even 2021 deadline, right? Before the Cubs got rid of them and they weren't playing anymore and things like that. Like, you can't count on this stuff. And at some point, you build up that depth for a reason, and an opportunity to win, an opportunity, as a lot of us keep saying, to play meaningful baseball games for the rest of this season. Whatever that looks like beyond 162, I don't know. But the opportunity is there, and, at some point sitting around, for the future, right? And holding on to things, and, it's not time yet. Like, it has to be time at some point, right? They played themselves back into the race. Like, you built up this prospect depth for a reason. It's time to use it.
Yeah, and by next year, like, we could still be in a crunch, right? Like there's
Right.
not enough room to play all these guys. There's not enough room to play Perlaza and Strump and Mervis and Velasquez.
And
So,
there are ways to improve your chances in 2023 and keep your kind of thought line, as Jed always does, to the future. There's ways to do that. It's not quite that complicated to improve now and not sacrifice much for the future.
Yeah. All right. Let's do a quick ad break here. We'll get back to it. First one here from our wonderful sponsor, Goose Island. CHGO is supported by Goose Island Beer Company, Chicago's beer since 1988. They have, as you guys know by now, a deep beer roster. The Goose IPA, a 6-time medal winner at Great American Beer Fest, always in style, citrus aroma, bold hop finish. They have the Tropical Beer Hug, a dry-hopped Imperial IPA that's 9.9% alcohol and dangerously easy to drink. They have my personal favorite, the 312 Wheat Ale. And they have the Full Pocket Pilsner, which is an everyday beer. Those who actually make beer, this is the one they're drinking. Grab ultra-fresh, brewery-exclusive beers at Goose Island Original Brewhouse on Clybourne Avenue in Leakin Park, or from their tap room on Fulton Street in Westtown. Goose Island Beer Company, Chicago's beer. Second break here from FOCO. Get fitted out in the best sports gear around. They have hoodies, shoes, signs, bobbleheads, everything in between. Baseball season's starting to dwindle down, believe it or not. We're getting to like the hundreds in terms of games played. So before you know it, baseball season will be, unfortunately, or maybe fortunately, depends how you look at it, a thing of the past. So take advantage of it. If you want to go out to Wrigley, the sun is still blazing hot right now. You need a straw hat. Go to FOCO, get those straw hats, an Aloha shirt, polos, bags, everything you need for a day in the bleachers at Wrigley. They have set decorations that they've given to us. Hayden Wesneski bobbleheads, for example. Check out FOCO.com or click the link in the description below for all non-presale items. Use promo code CHGO for 10% off. Finally, last ad break here from our great sponsor. I just wore my Shady Rays today, Corey, outside in California. I took on the sun with gear built to last. Our friends at Shady Rays have you covered for the warm weather ahead with premium polarized shades at an affordable price. Shady Rays is an independent sunglass company that offers a world-class product that's just as good as any expensive pair that I've worn. They have durable frames and extremely clear optics for outdoor adventures. That's not all. Shady Rays offers the most insane protection in all of eyewear. Every pair of sunglasses is backed by lost and broken replacements. If you lose or break your pair even on day one, they told us they'll send you a brand new pair, no questions asked. Wear your Shady Rays with confidence because they have your back long after you purchase. Together with their customers, Shady Rays is providing much needed support to nonprofit partners across the U.S. through Shady Rays Impact, from building play sets for pediatric cancer patients to providing young adults with MS. The outdoor adventure of a lifetime. Shady Rays is making an impact in your community and others like it now and for years to come. If you don't love your Shady Rays, exchange them for a new pair or return them for free within 30 days. There's no risk when you shop. Their team always has your back, and exclusively for our listeners, Shady Rays is giving out their best deal of the season. Go to shadyrays.com. Use code CHGO for 50% off 2+ pairs of polarized sunglasses. Try for yourself. The shades rated 5 stars by over 250,000 people.
All right, Brendan. So as we have been speaking, the Reds did win on Sunday. So it is 4 games. Now the Reds are in first place, so still 3.5 behind Milwaukee. Milwaukee has the Washington Nationals to start this week. So obviously what they do would matter in the NL Central standings, but let's take them out for a second. You're 4 games behind the first place Reds. Starting on Monday, you have 4 games with the first place Reds.
So just sweep
Let's do some math here, right?
Let's just sweep them.
If you won all 4 of those games,
you would be in first place.
Right.
4 minus 4, I believe, makes you in first place. That's my math.
So Milwaukee notwithstanding, obviously, they are in the way at the moment. But it does kind of illustrate the point, right? It's a tough it's I know we sort of started with this, but again, like, it's pretty simple. Like, you can't sell off major pieces when you are literally playing the first place team for the amount of games you need to win to be in first place. It's pretty simple, right? Like, it lines up kind of nicely if you're looking at it that way. Just like, okay, yeah, like, that's not really a situation where you can be punting, right? So
Yeah.
it is going to be interesting. There's a lot of different directions on this. And I think, as you kind of noted, there's ways to get creative. If you can move some salary to kind of bring in more pieces, if you can attach guys like Nelson Velasquez, et cetera, to maybe younger prospects to kind of like up your return, things like that.
Yeah.
You see different things across.
Or even a Drew Smiley. You want to get rid of Drew Smiley, free up $10 million for $5 million this year and $10 million next year. Attach Nelson, attach Perlaza, attach these other guys as well.
Right. So it's going to be very interesting to see how this plays out. But I think the decision has been made, at least in terms of which direction you're going. And now it's just a question of how they execute this. And, there's a lot of teams, as we know, in this kind of new wild card era. There's a lot of teams that are, I think, a little confused, maybe is the word, about exactly what their chances are, where they sit in all of this. I mean, if we cut things off at the Pittsburgh Pirates, who are 9.5 out of a wild card spot, you have several teams that are within 6.5 games. The Mets, the Padres, the Cubs, the Phillies, and the Diamondbacks are all trailing Milwaukee, Miami, and San Francisco, if we're looking at this in this exact moment. So that's a lot of teams, like, in the thick of this hunt, and that affects the trade deadline, right? Like, you have a lot of teams that are maybe soft buyers, soft sellers, big-time sellers. We've already seen the Mets kind of pounce on, like, okay, we can shed some money, like, we can move some of these guys around, we can get some big-time prospects back if we keep some of this money. Like, sometimes you just strike when the iron's hot if there's a particular direction that you believe can help your team. And, that's kind of the situation that Jed is in. So
get creative. This is an opportunity,
Yeah.
We've been talking,
and, again, like,
for years.
Sure. And, I don't know how teams are going to feel, but maybe a team would be interested in Nick Madrigal and playing him at second base and sort of saying, hey, like, his bat looks better. He made his transition to a tougher defensive position. We are selling. We're out of it. We would be happy to play a guy that's not on a big, expensive contract and is showing some signs at the MLB level. I don't know if that's what the Cubs want to do, but that's kind of what you mean when you say, like, get creative here. Like, you've got needs on your roster. You've got sort of, surpluses of things on your roster. And, maybe there's a way that you can get better all around. But, again, like, there's things that just win. I think you have to look at who this team is, right? And we've talked about this a lot, Brendan. Like, Jed, we go to this quote a lot. Like, they are not the best teams blow teams out, right? And we did see a little bit of that, like, over the last week or so from this Cubs team, right? Like, on occasion, they are blowing teams out. But in general, they're going to play a lot of close games. They're going to have to win games and make those plays like they did on Friday night, turning double plays at the opportune moment. Getting that quality shutdown pitching, making incredible catches in center field. They have to do those things. We've talked about this all year, right? You look at who they are as a team, and I think that's how you approach this deadline, right? Like, the frequency with which a team in their position wins the World Series or does this, who cares? Right? There's recent examples of teams in similar spots going on runs and making it a very productive season, even if they didn't win the whole thing. And some of them did. But when I look at this deadline, you say, okay, this team might be playing a lot of close games. We know that this offense has been inconsistent at times. So what are the things that help that team win, right? Not just, any team, but this team, the 2023 Cubs. What helps them win games? Higher leverage relievers and some more power.
Yeah.
And that's, I think, the most obvious stuff. And we talked about it, how you go about acquiring it. That's up to Jed and, what all that looks like after the fact. But if you're going to be in a lot of close games, tight games, and we know, right, when you see the Milwaukee Brewers later this year, those games are always close. They're always decided late. They're always very competitive games. How do you win those games? How do you help this roster win those games? To me, those are the two easiest things.
I agree.
Higher leverage relievers to help shut things down, and guys that can come up in a pinch and change the game with one swing.
Yeah, my last thought before we sign off here. I've talked about confidence in the front office going forward. And I try to find examples of where Jed and the front office have done good work and try to find examples of where you can put your confidence in. This is a huge, huge basket of confidence that if they hit this trade deadline, then it does change how I view the front office going forward. If they don't hit at this trade deadline, and I'm not even talking about like the current team, right? I'm talking about how this team operates for the future. And if I see other teams across the league making moves, I'm like, wow, they're making moves for the immediate competitive team and beyond, and we're not doing that, I will be perturbed. I will not be happy with that. My confidence going forward will suffer. At the same time, if Jed goes out and makes moves that obviously improves this team, at the same time improving next year and the years beyond, the tone changes significantly. So that's why, for me, I'm really curious, not just about the competitive team this year, but I do genuinely believe this could be an opportunity to improve next year and years beyond. And this is going to, in my mind, have potential to dramatically influence my perception of the front office going forward.
Yeah. This is interesting. Like I said, I think this is the most, 2021 ahead of that deadline, especially that series in Milwaukee, right? Like a lot of that stuff, felt very significant, but the writing was kind of on the wall for that, right? Like we knew that, they had been making the kind of Last Dance references and things like that. Like we sort of knew that all of that was maybe coming. So certainly that, period is, I think, the most recent, like super significant period for all of us in terms of how the team played and stuff like that. But in terms of like consequence and everything, like I think you were right. Like I think you'd have to go back to kind of some point at 2019 to when we've kind of had a period like this. Like you are welcoming the first place team who, as I said, you are conveniently exactly the number of games you play them at Wrigley Field behind them in the NL Central. And I think either before your second game or right after your second game, I think before, you got the trade deadline, and then to end that week at Wrigley, you welcome in one of the best teams in baseball for the last few years. High stakes. Very high stakes. But if you're Jed Hoyer, you put this team together, there were a lot of risks, and we saw that throughout a lot of this season, what a team constructed this way could look like, and if things didn't go right, what that would look like, and it was reflected in their record. But for the last few weeks, especially in this second half, they're playing the brand of baseball you would have dreamed of them playing, right? Like if everything came together for this group, this is what it looks like. And again, you need it sustained for more than just this stretch post All-Star break, but they're doing it and they've gotten themselves back in the mix. And if you're Jed Hoyer, you have a chance to say, okay, this is what I kind of hoped this would look like. Now I can help them and send in some reinforcements and kind of keep it going. What do I need to do to keep it going and to avoid the inconsistencies popping up again? Because they will, right?
Oh, yeah.
But you've got an opportunity now to kind of buoy some of those, like lift them up a little bit, give them a little bit of a life raft and say, okay, like we're in this mix. Here's how I prevent this from happening again. How do we prevent getting swept by the Angels again, right? Like it's going to be interesting. It's a huge week for the Chicago Cubs, but it's going to be a lot of fun. They're back at home. Like Wrigley is rocking no matter what. And this is where those times where, I know our friend Cody Bellinger always says like, we deserve better or we don't deserve this. Like I remember being at, some of the games on the last homestand. And at the time, they're much more in the like probably sellers camp, right? 3-2 pitch, crowd is up, crowd is going crazy. Cubs win, crowd's going crazy. People are still in the bleachers singing "Go Cubs Go." Like this fan base is ready. They've been ready.
Let's go.
You and I are ready. Cody's ready. Ryan's ready. Stucky's
ready.
back. He's ready.
Yeah.
Like they're in the mix. So go mess around and see what this team can do. Crazier things have happened. I promise you. Worse teams than this have made the playoffs. They've won championships. They've won divisions. The team showed up when they had to show up. So now it's on the front office to reward them for that. And I think, not to go on a full tangent here as we're over the hour mark, but it wouldn't be me if we didn't. I think this has ramifications long term. Dansby signed up to be a winner. He signed up to win. He told you that a million times. If you show this group, hey, we see what you're doing out there, we're going to pay it back to you and make this team better and let you guys have a good, honest run at a playoff spot here. I think that matters for morale and just how this clubhouse feels about this organization going forward. If it didn't work out this year, or Jed said, nah, whatever, and they go and sign Ohtani and whatever, sure, right? It doesn't matter, right? They'll get over it, right? But I do think it matters. I think there's a, sort of ripple effect that this has. The front office showing that they have their back, They had their back against the wall. It was do or die, and they showed up. And I think it's, any business that you work in, it's nice to know, hey, I did my job.
Support.
Do you believe in me, right? I think it matters. So I think, you want to see that come Tuesday, even if it's not this huge splash, but just some show from the front office of hey, go get it, guys. Y'all did what you needed to do. Go get it.
Don't underestimate the effect of having a mental boost on your ability to go out, perform, and in doing so, go out and adjust and continue to develop. You look at guys like Morel and young guys, even Nico still young and developing, that has an effect. I think, again, to the earlier point, boost the leverage, show a degree of support, and you sometimes see unexpected changes for the good. Let's do it. Go out, improve the team, make the playoffs, show some support, have one eye on the future and the present, get creative with trades, show me, you, fans, the front office is unequivocally the best one for this organization going forward, and let's change the tone. I'm done doing this. I'm done talking about this team in this up and down roller coaster fashion. Do we believe? Do we not believe? Is the front office the right one for this team? Is it not the right one for this team? I'm done with it. Put a stake in the sand. Forget it. This is the path going forward, and this is the opportunity to do it.
Coal under pressure makes diamonds, baby.
Let's go. Give me some
put this team, put them under pressure. Let's go.
Yeah,
let's give them a shot. And I'll end by, I'm reminded of one of their old slogans, right? You heard it from Dansby, you heard it from Nico, you heard it from Cody Bellinger about staying here. This team is in, right? We know the 40,000 plus, the Wrigley faithful, will fill beautiful, historic Wrigley Field every night. They're in, right? Let's get the front office in. It sounds like they are. It sounds like Cody Bellinger's off the market. It sounds like they're going to be buyers, but let's see it, right? And that's when we get to the old slogan, right? Everybody in, baby. Let's do it. All right?
I like it. Yeah.
Let's go. Cody, Luke, Ryan, they will have you for your Reds pre- and post-game. They'll have your coverage all week. Brendan and I will be back with you next Sunday after the Cubs have bolstered their roster. Jed Hoyer has killed the trade deadline, and they finished off a 5-2 week against the Reds and Braves. How about that, right? Is that fine?
That's fine.
Brendan and I will be back with you next Sunday. But the tone has shifted, folks. The Cubs showed up when they needed to most. They are in the race. Let's hope this is a fun trade deadline. CHGO Cubs team will have your full trade deadline coverage, everything that happens, instant reactions, articles, podcasts, live videos, and more. So stick with the CHGO Cubs coverage team, CHGO Sports YouTube page for all your video needs. We appreciate your support of CHGO and the CHGO Cubs podcast. Brendan and I will talk to you again next week. And they're buyers at the deadline, baby. As always, go Cubs.